Hello and welcome to another episode of Square Up with Gray Square. Today, we'll be hanging out with Mr. John Bura, who's nice enough to get in contact with us. We found him. He is the CEO of Mammoth Interactive. I'll save the description of his business for him to do himself because he'll do a much better job of it than I will as a founding member. So, one, thanks for jumping on with us today. We appreciate your time and thank you for hanging out with us. I'm excited to hear your story about your business and, any advice that you can give our audience through us hanging out here. So welcome and thanks for hanging out, man. How's it going?
It's good, thanks. Great to be here. Always love talking about my business.
Yeah, don't we all, right? We all love talking about the cool things that, we find interesting that we do. Good stuff. So let's start by giving us a rundown. What, tell us about your business, what you do, who your customers are, what you got going on.
All right, so my name is John Bura, and I run a company called Mammoth Interactive, and we make mostly training content. So I started my business from scratch in my bedroom in 2011, and I've been an entrepreneur since I was practically 17. So I've been doing things here and there, and it really picked up in 2011. And since then, we've sold about 700,000 courses worldwide. We mostly make coding courses. If you learn to code, you can check out mammothinteractive.com, of course. And our courses usually tend to focus around building practical projects. So if you need to add in something like a mobile app or a machine learning project to your resume and your LinkedIn, and if you do that, you'll probably get you usually get a promotion, or you might get that job in the first place, and that's what we've done. But one of my favorite stories is about how I started doing that. So I was trying to get into the video game industry, and I had tried all these different ways. And one day I said, you know what? I'm just going to make my own video game. Okay, right?
No kidding.
And at the time, it was way different. This was over 10 years ago, and everything was a lot more strict back then. And I've been coding for a long time, but I had to learn C#. And I bought an online course. I went through the course. I made an Xbox 360 game, and then my career skyrocketed after that. It was like it was like all these closed doors, just like no, and then bam, all the doors were open. Like after I made that project,
everything opens up. Yeah.
Exactly. And all I had to do was just spend my free time and make a project. Now, this was, again, 10 years ago, so more people do that now than in the past. But, because I did that, I'm like, oh, wow, this is awesome. And so after that, I made about 40 iOS games in 2010. It was, it was a lot. And whenever I would show my game to someone would say, how did you make that? Or I'd make an app and every single person did not care about the games that I was making.
Yeah.
No one did, but they all asked me, how do you do that? And then I had come across this startup called Udemy, which was really new at the time. And, I'm like, you know what, I should put out a course on how to make a game from scratch. Yeah. And I did, and people loved it. And then after that, we've made tons of courses. We have an insanely large content library, and I have multiple people making courses now, and that's where we are today.
That's such a cool story. So was your inspiration kind of based around when I went out of my way to get some education, it helped my career. I could maybe do that for other people. Was that kind of what made it seem like a lucrative idea?
Absolutely. And sometimes when you start a business or you're in a career, sometimes there's just an opportunity for you that's just waiting, and if you do it, it just presents itself as being very lucrative. And sometimes you might do the same thing in a slightly different area and it won't be as lucrative. But at the time, a lot of people needed to learn to code, and people still do, because most people on the planet don't know how to code.
Yours truly included, yeah.
So it's one of those things, as soon as I was, I really focused on the coding part in my job descriptions, I started to get a lot more offers, right? And even today, I get recruiters coming to me with ridiculous offers, like offers I would have taken in a heartbeat as soon as I graduated from university.
Right.
Some of them are just, I really wish I had the opportunity 10 plus years ago to take them, but now I have a business, and I'm not complaining at all, but it really does open doors if you can do coding well.
No, that's awesome. So this is kind of I know I didn't plan to ask on this one, but I did. You mentioned being an entrepreneur since 17. Do you mind sharing, what was the first go at it? What was your first, business that you started, whether it was something awesome or something that didn't do anything? What was your first go at it?
Okay, so the first thing I did is, so when I was 17, I still had a goatee, and I looked like I was 25. Okay,
Nice.
so
Very nice.
And I've been playing musical instruments since I was a very small child, and
Sure.
I was pretty good at it. So I basically walked into a guitar store, and I said, I'd like a job teaching guitar lessons, right? And they gave me a job, right? And then from that, I started teaching guitar lessons on my own side too, and I was basically teaching 53 students a week between the studio and myself, and I was getting paid, 3 to 5 times minimum wage. So at the time, I could have been working at McDonald's, which I actually did work at Subway for a bit. But, I could have worked at McDonald's or Subway, or I could get paid like 5 times minimum wage and run my own business.
Yeah.
And, from there, I've always been kind of like doing like freelance jobs here and there. But that was like the major one. And I got so many students when I was like 18 years old. And that really shaped my career today.
Sure. Were you getting people through starting out friends and family or networking or some sort of advertising you were doing? Like, how were you going about it?
I mean, this was such a long time ago. I'm not sure if it's relevant now. But, essentially, I put up a classified ad in the newspaper. That's how old this information is, right? You can do, if you're doing that kind of tutoring today, which is still pretty lucrative, you can just put something up on Craigslist, charge a little bit less than your competition, and go from there. That'd be the way I do it today.
No, that's awesome. Thanks for entertaining my curiosity.
No problem.
But so to kind of get back to it, for a lot of people checking this out, they're interested in, in a lot of cases, building their own business. They got some cool idea, and I know that could range from, a million different things. As someone who started as a solo, entrepreneur doing their own thing with no real help or infrastructure, what advice would you have for somebody getting started?
So the number one thing you have to remember is that if you start a business, you have to provide value. And that has to be something, right? It has to be some kind of value that people are willing to pay for, right? So, in my case today, people want the latest coding tutorial. And, that's something that people are willing to pay for. And you have to figure out what's valuable to people and what people are willing to pay for. And, depending on what kind of business, and if it's mostly a tech business, you want something along the software as a service line. And the easiest way to start one of those companies is to just kind of job chaperone some people in an industry and say, hey, what's your biggest pain point, right? So, if you have some friends in construction, say, hey, can I job shadow you at the job site today and just ask you what your problems are? And, they'll say, we really have this problem with blank from a software point of view. And they're like, okay, well, I'll get back to you in a couple weeks. And then you build a solution for them, and then you get the construction company to pay you for that solution. And chances are, if it's a solution for that one construction company, then it's a solution for a ton of different ones. And who knows, maybe they'll just buy it out right there. And then in a few months' time, you would have made a ton of money. So I would go to just finding a small problem that you can solve with software if you code, which is why there's a lot of money going into software. Software as a service, if you don't know, is recurring revenue solving a problem. If you can do that, then you can do this. You can do this again and again and again. Maybe takes this one thing 6 months, and then take a couple months off, travel the world, and do it again, right? Because once you do it once, you can do it again.
No, that's outstanding. So, just a general question about coding. As someone who understands the value in it but doesn't have the skill, for me, I graduated college in 2007. With a marketing degree that's very different than the things you're learning in marketing today. There were no coding classes when I went to school. It wasn't even really a relevant field to even get into. For someone that's looking at it and interested in it and kind of that can see the value, see that it's a field with some potential, but is a little intimidated, where do you start? Where do you start as someone that's interested in that type of field?
So one of the things I always talk about in my courses and all the courses here at Mammoth Interactive is that coding is kind of a process. It's not really like a task or anything. So if you want to start, the easiest thing to do is to just start. Go online, look up some tutorials, just start coding, okay? And make it a habit of just doing stuff. And with coding, you want to focus on building something that's practical. So, I built a simple website, or it doesn't even have to be like a whole big project. It's like, I built something like a landing page and it doesn't even have to look good. The whole point is that you do it, and then you try it again, and then you try it again, and then it gets better and better and better, right? So if you want to do landing pages, like marketing, for instance, you say, okay, I'm going to build a landing page, and you'll give it a score. Maybe it's 6 out of 10, okay? Or, whatever it is. And then you do another landing page, you do little things, make it a little bit better, and you're like, okay, this is better, 6.5. Then you do it again, you're like, oh, this was worse than the other 2, it's 5. And you do it again. But if you did that 10 times in a row, you made 10 landing pages, guaranteed you'd learn. Because when the thing about learning is you learn a lot in between the project versus the actual project. You go through the project, and then you do some self-reflection, and then you do some more of it, right? And it's that process of building these small iterative steps and iterative projects that will help you get to become the coder. And the best coders can do this, right? And that's my secret to success.
That's awesome. I've always found it interesting with coding when you ask an expert, what can you do? They're like, well, whatever you can come up with, we can figure out. It's again way over my head. That's awesome. So, we had discussed a little bit before about the volume of business that you've done at this point. You're selling over 700,000 courses, which is an impressive mountain to climb for you, I'm sure. What was the point where you really think things took off and you were able to scale? Like, when did it go from, I'm sure initially just finding that one customer with that one simple problem, like in the construction example, to this is a real thing that I'm able to scale? Like, what was kind of a tipping point to use kind of a buzzword?
So for me, it actually all happened almost overnight. But my favorite saying is that overnight sensations take 20 years to make, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, in your overnight success.
Yeah. And so, I really got my my big break on Boxing Day in 2011.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what Boxing Day is, it's the day after Christmas in some countries, right? So yeah.
I'm a soccer fan, and I watch a lot of European soccer, and Boxing Day is an all-day soccer day.
There you go.
That's the only reason
right?
I know it.
Yeah. So, at one point in time, I found out that some people just don't celebrate Boxing Day, which was weird. Anyway, so the whole point is that Boxing Day, there was a sale on AppSumo, and it sold that first course that I made, and it made like thousands of dollars. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. But 3 years before that, like, you remember 2008, it wasn't very good. It was hard to find jobs, and it was hard to find businesses, right?
Yeah, that's when I was entering the job market.
Me too. I graduated in 2008, so it was rough.
Lucky us, right? Lucky us.
Yeah, I know. And even as a coder, it's hard. I remember one job I applied to, and this was after I made my Xbox 360 game and a couple other projects. They're like, yeah, you just don't have enough experience. And I'm like, right? But nowadays, it's just like, whatever. If you can code, you're in, right? So, but anyway, it was a really hard grind to that point. And to the point where I had, my income streams have dried up. And I'm like, I'm going to go to zero in the next 2 months. Like, no money in my bank account. And then this kicks up, and then all of a sudden I started getting like 5-figure checks. And my crazy thing is that I paid more in taxes the following year, in 2012, than I made, like, at all in 2011. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Like, it was just crazy. I couldn't believe it. But you know what? I knew that it would happen one day, and that we were kind of in somewhat of a funk.
Sure.
With that 2008 financial crisis. I knew it would happen one day. It was hard. It was really hard. But for the most part, I had been learning all these skills along the way. And once I got that, it was like, I'm putting like nitrous oxide in your engine. It was just like, okay, now it's time to go. Let's do this.
That's awesome. I think of the common story for a lot of, any entrepreneur that I know, there's always that tough time where there's a very clear point of like, all right, this thing is this even worth my time anymore? Where you're at the point of like, all right, this is gonna collapse, and then you decide not to bail and you keep after it, and then it eventually pops off. I think that's something that a lot of people will face that are starting a business. How do you recommend not bailing? Like, how do you recommend, like, not kind of giving in to and going and working for the man, which is always that kind of temptation that's there. Like, does that make sense, the question? Like, how do you kind of get through that,
Absolutely. No, that's a perfect question. So the couple things you can do is you can listen to your customers and you can always pivot, okay? I originally wanted to make apps and games. Like, that's what I wanted to do. But then I saw that literally everyone did not want that, right? Like, if I would just have a conversation with some friends, and I'd be like, hey, look at this game I made. It's super awesome. And they're like, well, how did you do that? And I said, okay, well, it's simple. You just pull up this, and this. They're like, well, that makes no sense to me. So, because I was a teacher a long time ago, I could combine my coding skills and my teaching skills. And that's another thing that can really leverage any kind of success. If you take 3 different items that are somewhat related and put them together into a package that's unique, bam, you got a business there.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So I guess next question here. For somebody that is, how do I want to word this? Like, out of all the places you can start in coding. I mean, I know you said earlier you just kind of start. What's a very basic point that somebody new can start at? Like, if I'm checking out the library of courses, what's my introduction? What's my 101 course?
Okay. So I would start with web development, and you're going to get different answers from different people. But the short answer is that web development, the skills that you'll learn in web development will carry over. And that's another thing that I should mention when you're learning to code, is that if you pick one language and it doesn't work for you, try another one, right? And web development, again, a lot of the concepts that you learn, usually learn in 3 languages, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And they're all a little bit different. And if you learn the basics between all those, then chances are they will move over to other languages. Where I would not start is machine learning, right? Just don't start, because you need, like, it's complicated even for coders, right? I know some people who are brilliant coders, and you put a machine learning problem in front of them, and they're like, I have no idea what's going on, right? So don't start with machine learning. If you really like data science, you can start with Python, which is it carries up to machine learning. But if I say to anyone, start with web development.
Okay, that's awesome. So, what's next for your business? What are you? I mean, obviously you've done well, got a lot of awesome, exciting things going. What are you trying to pull off in 2020? What's interesting to you at this point?
Yeah. So it's been a long time since I started this business, and over the years, we were talking about scalability, and the course market, as of now, isn't as scalable as I'd like it to be. And I remember I talked to all the big players in the industry, and it's usually my number one complaint is that I would love to be able to scale this up to 40 employees and all that. And so right now, we are, the cool thing actually, in the last 6 months, a lot of companies have been just licensing our content, right? And we haven't seen this ever before, where, usually, and the reason is that a lot of these other bigger companies who get millions of dollars of funding, they usually want to keep their licenses behind some kind of paywall, whereas we will just license it. And usually it's a business that says, hey, we like your course and we like to give it to our employees. Like, here's one-time licensing fee, here you go. And so we're going to be doing more and more in that. And then we tried boot camps a couple years ago, and it didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to, but we've tweaked the parameters, and we're going to be doing a lot of that stuff. And we're going to be doing some machine learning boot camps next year. So that's kind of the big thing. But we're also just kind of scaling up the licensing. And, we make courses for a lot of other companies too, so we do that as well. And we're trying to scale that up as well. And it's funny because when I started in 2012 and 2011, it was a whole different place. And I think everyone's kind of used to how things work in the industry now. And, I have the fire going. I just need to pour some gasoline on it, and things should, in theory, go up.
That's it. That's awesome. So if I'm out there and I'm interested in either, potentially picking your brain if I'm out there, or learning about some of these courses, where do I find you in your business? How do I find you?
The best thing you can do is follow us on Twitter. It's at Mammoth Company, and that's where you get all the updates. We post all of our cool stuff that's happening. We post stuff that students have done. You can see our students have done actually some pretty cool projects, and if you want your project to be featured, let us know, and we'll post it on Twitter for you.
That's
so
awesome.
that's another thing. We have a lot of followers, so that's probably the best way. You can go to our website, mammothinteractive.com, and you can take a look at some of our courses there. But Twitter's probably the best way to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And by the way, I also started a YouTube channel. And what's crazy about my business is that I actually didn't start with a huge email list or anything. I just built it up from scratch. And YouTube has just never been a big part of my marketing plan, but it is now. So you can follow me at Bura Tech. That's my new technology-related channel.
Okay.
If you like this conversation, I talk about it a lot on Bura Tech, so you can check it out there.
That's awesome. We'll post links to all that stuff everywhere.
Sweet.
Awesome. Good deal. Oh, I had one more question since I kind of thought of it as you were talking about it. What's something cool that one of your students has gone on to do? What's the point of pride where somebody that watched this course went on to do whatever cool thing?
So
a lot of people that you like.
So what's really funny about this is that some of the students that I've really helped never talk to me, right? And I really want them to.
Yeah, right. They just check it out and they go on.
Yeah, so I met someone who got a job at a tech company, like, hey, I took your course and now I got a job. I'm like, great,
nice.
That's awesome. But why don't you tell me about it? I could post you on Twitter, and that really helps me out. It really does. But a lot of people we had a course called Coding for Parents where parents will make apps for their kids, right? Because I have 2 kids at home, and I'm like, well, I'll just make apps for my kids. Why not, right? So now
why not, right? That's an easy thing to do. Why not? That's so
why
cool.
not?
That's
and then
so
I said,
cool.
well, why don't I teach parents to do that? So we've had a couple of people make apps for their grandkids, and I thought that was awesome, And it's kind of the course, they can put out the app onto the App Store, make a bit of money too, and then they get to help their kids and the thousands of other kids.
That's awesome. That's such a cool story. Awesome. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate your time and you taking a chance to talk to some of the people that check us out. Let's definitely stay in touch. Let's make this happen in the future. I'd love to do a follow-up conversation down the road and kind of see how things have changed for you down the road.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks so much for your time. I'm glad we could pull this off. If you're interested in learning more about John's company, we'll be as we post this content, we'll make sure to post all the links to everything we discussed today and more. So awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out. We definitely appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks a lot. You got it.